We are so thrilled to be welcoming you to the very first virtual town hall on the subject of how to identify misinformation. And so on behalf of AARP Washington and the Center for an Informed Public and our friends at BECU who have been great partners with us, I want to welcome you to this event today. We've been absolutely thrilled at the interest in this topic. We have, as you know, this is the first of 4 events we're going to be sponsoring this month. And we already have over 4,000 people pre-registered for at least one of these events, including 1,400 people for today's events with Dr. Jevin West from the University of Washington. So thrilled at the response. Obviously, we've hit a chord here. This is a topic of intense interest. I'm going to be introducing Dr. West in a moment, but I want to just take a couple seconds to talk about why AARP is doing this right now at this moment in time. Some of you may know that for many years, AARP Washington has focused on giving consumer information to our members that can help them lead better lives as they age. For over a decade now, we've traveled the state giving talks on everything from how to be a good caregiver to how to plan for retirement. We even gave a cooking class a couple years ago. But I think the thing that we're most known for is our tips and information about how to avoid scams and frauds. And I think by the end of this hour, you'll see the connection between the misinformation work we're doing and the scams and frauds. Not exactly the same thing, but there is a lot of crossover. Well, since COVID hit in March, we haven't changed our commitment to this type of consumer education. What has changed is the content of it and the way it's being delivered. In the 1st of March, like everybody else, we suspended all of our in-person events, suspended tax aid, driver safety, all of the classes we've been teaching, and we immediately sort of transitioned to doing teletown halls with especially mayors and local public health officials, but again, with the goal of getting practical, nonpartisan, objective information to our members so that they can stay safe. Now, this month, we are switching from a focus on the pandemic to what some call an infodemic. And this is just the barrage of misinformation and lies and conspiracy theories that are flooding our social media platforms and flooding our lives. I don't think I've ever seen a time when there has been more of that, certainly in my life. And it's getting to the point where we're not even sure where to turn to get true information anymore. And what exacerbates it, of course, is that with COVID, now we're more reliant than ever on these platforms, which makes it even worse that there's all this stuff in it. But luckily for us today, we have one of the nation's leading experts on how to spot misinformation, how to report it, and how to determine what is true and what is not. Dr. Jevin West is an associate professor in the School of Information at the University of Washington. He's the co-founder of the Data Lab and the director of the new Center for an Informed Public at the University of Washington. We're going to talk a little bit more later about that. We have just entered into a strategic partnership with the center, and I couldn't be more excited about that. It is really an exciting development to have that right here in Seattle. Dr. West's research and teaching focus on the impact of technology on science and society with a focus on the spread of misinformation. And he developed a course along with his colleague, Dr. Karl Bergstrom, entitled Calling BS, I'm shortening that, that teaches students how to combat misinformation. And I understand this is one of the most popular classes at the University of Washington, and it fills up minutes after it opens for fall registration. Dr. West is also the co-author of the book Calling BS. Let him talk more about that a little later, The Art of Skepticism in a Data-Driven World. And, in addition to all of these, I haven't even talked about the academic accomplishments, but Jevin, as I call him, is just a really great guy to work with. He's super excited. As you'll see, he just got boundless enthusiasm, a super strong passion for this topic. And that's really where we connected several months ago when we started talking about how could we take the power of AARP and the power of all of the great scholars at the University of Washington and build something with it. And we'll talk a little bit later about what that build might look like. So for now, I just wanted to tell you how this next hour is going to go. Dr. West is going to talk for about 45 minutes. As my colleague Amanda Frame said, if you want to ask a question, just go to the question and answer box and type in your question. I will be looking at that. And at the end, we'll spend about 15 or 20 minutes grilling Dr. West with these really hard questions. And if we can't, we may be able, if we have a lot of questions, we can spend a couple more minutes and go over. So without further ado, let me please join me in welcoming Dr. Jevin West from the University of Washington.
Thanks so much, Doug, and thanks so much to AARP and for all of you for taking the time today to listen to what we've been learning about this topic and what we can all do to become better information discerners. And I've already seen some of the questions coming in, and I want to jump right to them because there's so many good questions in there. But I think what I'll do first is give the presentation, and then we'll move to that. And I'm happy to stay afterwards to discuss this topic more. So as Doug mentioned, I spend my days and literally nights studying this issue of misinformation and how it spreads in science and in society, and think of ways of what we can do to slow its spread. To me, it's one of the most pressing challenges of our time. It's really difficult to solve human health and population health and climate health and economic health if we can't get the health of our information systems right first. And sometimes it really cuts close to home. Here's an image that we're all getting too familiar with here in the Pacific Northwest and on the West Coast of the United States. But that image is not from the Pacific Northwest or California. It's an image from Australia. And it seems like a lifetime ago, but Australia was also struggling with their Black Summer, as they call it, one of the worst fire seasons they've ever had in their history. And I was there in November when this was happening. I was visiting Sydney University, studying actually misinformation and disinformation. And here was my view at the end of my trip of the Sydney Opera House. And what I found, what I noticed as a visitor there was the havoc that these fires were having on the communities, but also the disinformation and misinformation, the havoc that those things were having also on their communities and the fires themselves. I then flew back to Seattle at the beginning of September, came home, and we launched this new center, the Center for an Informed Public. Sorry, I just realized you hadn't seen the Sydney House photograph that I have. My apologies. Still learning the system as well. I then flew back to Seattle, and we launched our center on December 3rd. This center is housed in the Information School at the University of Washington in collaboration with HCDE and the law school, but it's also a statewide collaboration between Washington State University and University of Washington, at least in the overall effort and the commitment to addressing it. The two presidents, Kurt Schultz and Anna-Marie Kase, were there to shake hands on their commitment as university leaders on this topic. And at that time, in that picture, I remember even thinking, I'm sitting there to the left, I remember thinking that we had our work cut out in this topic area and informing this center, but I would have never guessed to the degree at which 2020 really would make sure get our work, how much our work was cut out this year. Fast forward a month. Here is a headline from Bloomberg News on January 24th. This was one of those early reports that showed there was 2 confirmed cases in France. That seems like a lifetime ago when we were having those kinds of headlines. But it was on this day, on January 24th, that we started collecting social media data, Twitter data most commonly, around the coronavirus. And that particular day was the day we started sort of collecting and looking for trends of conspiracy theories and rumors that we knew were going to pop up. And today we have over 2 billion tweets just on the coronavirus crisis. And of course, we've been collecting on other crises that we've seen in 2020. Then a couple weeks later, the World Health Organization came out with this report. This particular report especially caught my attention because of a statement they made, if you zoom in, about not only the challenges and the problems that the virus was having on the world, but also the massive infodemic, as Doug mentioned, which is this overabundance of information, some of it accurate, but much of it not accurate, that was causing, not maybe the equal proportion of problems, but was causing problems in addressing this world crisis that we're in. And that's the world in which we live in this center right now. Let me give you an example of one of those conspiracy theories. And I can tell you over the last 9 months, we've seen a lot of them. And some of them really explode, like this particular one has, at least in the mid parts of the pandemic back in April. So here's a conspiracy theory about the idea that 5G telecommunications is either spreading the virus or reducing our immune systems to responding to the virus. Now, this conspiracy theory has been completely debunked and is not true, just to make sure that I'm very clear here. But what you'll see in our data, if you go back to April, we were collecting at that time, we had collected at that time about 400 million tweets around coronavirus. That includes both rumors and also all the other conversations that are going on when talking about coronavirus, on social media and Twitter in particular. But in April, we had counted nearly 5 million tweets around the 5G conspiracy theory. That's more than 1 in every 100 tweets up to that point were about the 5G conspiracy theory. So that may seem like a small number, 1 in 100, that's not that big, but when you consider all the conversations happening around the coronavirus, and to have that many around this one particular conspiracy theory shows you the scale of the problem. And that's just one of the many, including conspiracy theories about the role that Bill Gates is playing, about the role that large companies and large leaders are playing, and the fact that it might be a pandemic, which of course is not true either, but was one of these conspiracy theories as well. We've seen the rise of extreme conspiracy theory groups that have arisen and been sort of emboldened during the pandemic. QAnon is one of those. You may have been reading in the paper, this conspiracy theory that the world is being run by a cabal of Illuminati that are pedophiles and devil worshippers and child traffickers. It's a really extreme conspiracy theory, and it has moved outside the internet and now has been, people have seen protesters at over 70 countries now with shirts and paraphernalia of QAnon around this issue of the pandemic and around other issues too, other conspiracy theories that come together. So this shows you the role they play, and it has local effects on us as well. Let me give you a local example that was reported recently in the Seattle Times. An individual from Woodinville recently posted on Facebook this message that indicated that maybe only 6% of all the COVID deaths that we were seeing in the US were caused by COVID, and all the others that were reported by CDC did not have anything to do with COVID. Now, that's not true, and CDC wasn't hiding these numbers. They had been posting these numbers. The issue there was that they were reporting those that were due to comorbidities, so those where someone might die, let's say, of pneumonia, but that pneumonia being caused by COVID would put them in this category. So it doesn't mean that CDC had been hiding a number and that it was only 6%, but this one post got retweeted by a QAnon follower that had lots of followers themselves, which then reached all the way to the leader of the free world, and it was retweeted and amplified even further. Now, that was debunked by Dean Miller, who is a fact checker for Lead Stories and has been doing a lot of good work in this area. But this should demonstrate how fast these rumors can travel from one individual post on Twitter or Facebook all the way up to leaders of countries. And so this is why we get especially concerned. Now, I do want to emphasize at this point that our center is a nonpartisan center, and we do look at this problem from all sides, and we do see misinformation and disinformation on both sides. So when we give examples on one side, we tend to find examples from others. So let's return to these awful fires that we're dealing with in the Northwest. Here, I want to explain how misinformation and disinformation, it's not just an annoying conversation that's happening online that we can ignore, because it's having direct effects on our ability locally to deal with this. So we're living through one of the dirtiest air and that we've ever seen, certainly that I've ever seen in living in the Pacific Northwest. And the rumors and disinformation that are traveling around this issue are affecting the emergency responders. So many of you might have been reading about in Oregon, in several counties, the 911 call centers have been inundated with concerned citizens about either Antifa or the Proud Boys. So those are groups from both sides of the political aisle, that's what makes it especially interesting in this case, that are being accused of starting these fires. And 911 responders and the emergency responders themselves are having to take time to deal with those rather than the actual emergencies, and trying to get people to safety and not blocking roads because someone might think that there's an Antifa person or a Proud Boys person that's there to start fires. It is causing havoc in the real world, not just online, and this is why we're concerned about it. And of course, now we have the election. So we have all one crisis to the next in 2020. And we'll look back in strange ways at this particular year, but we're also now concerned with a lot of the misinformation that will likely occur from both sides. This is an example from both sides that will affect how we do collective decision-making in this upcoming US election. So I start this talk sort of giving you some context, telling you sort of my personal stories, my local stories, why it matters. And hopefully I don't get you too depressed about the issue. We will work through this. I think I'm an optimist despite all of these challenges we have about our information environments. But I want to spend the rest of the talk talking about what we can do about it. And when I mean we, I talk about our center, about AARP, about local organizations, public officials, our governments, our business leaders, and then what you can do about it, what you individually can do about this, and how you can become a better information discerner. Now, of course, I only have about 20-something minutes left to talk about this, and my colleague and I and my colleagues in the center have, dozens and dozens of hours of lectures and material for this. So I'm just sort of picking and highlighting a few things that I wanted to talk about today. We can follow up with them later. So let's start with what we can do about it. As Doug mentioned, we have this new Center for an Informed Public, where our mission is to resist this kind of strategic misinformation, promote an informed society, and strengthen democratic discourse. This is a team effort. This is not just me. I'll mention my colleagues from across campus that are devoted to this, and also the greater team, the bigger team that's growing from students and postdocs to faculty to our core staff that are absolute superstars and devoting their time and careers to this. So people are working on it. We're so lucky to have this center here in the Pacific Northwest, but we will be a leader not just for us in the Pacific Northwest, but internationally. And that is our goal, because this is an international issue. We spend a lot of our time in 4 different areas. Research, of course, is our main expertise, but also in policy, education, and community engagement, which is why I'm here today, and why I also think it's one of the most important things we can do once we learn what we can from the research. So, of course, the research is spent swimming in this social media data that I mentioned before, and I won't spend time talking about that, but just to note here that this is where we spend a lot of our time tracking these rumors, looking at how ideas and individuals get amplified and misamplified at times. We use the COVID situation as an example of how that also interfaces with science and experts and gatekeepers and leaders and influencers in this information space. You can check on some of our research by just following us or going to our website at the center, which is always publicly available. We make all our stuff available. We spend a lot of time, like I mentioned, in community labs and libraries and in high schools and middle schools and with other organizations. So reach out to us if you're interested. And we do things like bring high school kids from all over the state to our campus. We'll be doing this at Washington State University and at the University of Washington. So these are the things that we're doing as a community and as a center to address this. We also have high school teachers developing this themselves and developing curriculum of the high school teachers here, and also that's spreading to other states. I'll call out Sean Lee and Liz Krause on this as well. And also, of course, this organization, AARP, as Doug mentioned, it's a partnership that I'm super excited about. And BECU is supporting that partnership. Our center and our university and AARP are coming together to figure out how we can both meet our education mission by getting out there and meeting not just with students, but from K1 to K99, because everyone is susceptible and everyone needs to become, we all need, including me, who lives and breathes this, need to always be developing new habits of mind to become better fact checkers and discerners of misinformation and figure out ways to identify when something is false or not. So what we are doing is we are running an ambassador training program, and a week from Monday on September 28th, I think it is, there's information in the Resource Center. We will be doing a specific session on fact checking and showing you how you could be a digital volunteer in helping us identify misinformation. We'll start with misinformation about election integrity, but that likely will expand after this program, but this is an idea that we've been wanting to do for a long time, which is engage organizations like AARP and bring you and your expertise into our team and help us identify things that we can't always identify when we're looking at billions of tweets. It's easier when we get those leads from you, and we'll talk about that in just a second. This also gives me a chance to announce a project we just announced a couple weeks ago. The Election Integrity Partnership is a partnership with Stanford University and other organizations meant to monitor real-time misinformation around election integrity. And this is a nonpartisan effort too, where we'll be working with organizations across the space with media, looking at procedural information, participation, interference, fraud with government, civil society organizations, and media. This is, again, an example of things that we are doing. So there's community effort. There's other efforts across the country dealing with this. So people and organizations and communities are responding to this. So I started depressingly. Hopefully I'm raising your hopes just a little bit that we are doing better, but we have a lot of work to do. I mean, here's an example too of something you may identify. This was a video that went viral, at least during 2016. We'll likely see these kinds of videos during the current election of a video of people stuffing ballots. And we see this video being used on the left and the right, where Republicans will say Democrats are doing this and Democrats will say Republicans are doing this. But if you look closely and use some of the resources that are out there, among other fact-checking organizations, you will find that this was debunked and likely will have to be debunked again and again. This is the kind of thing that we're looking out for when it comes to election integrity. I also call a shout out to Snopes. The founder of Snopes will also be giving one of the talks in one of these sessions in the near future. All right, so I want to pause here just for a second now to sort of guide you for the rest of the way. Like I said, I had limited time, so in thinking about what I wanted to tell you about today, when it comes to misinformation and disinformation and its role in the current pandemic and also in the upcoming election, I wanted to mention three issues. One is of a new technology that you will likely see more of, for better and mostly for worse, something called deepfakes or synthetic media. And then the two other things will be just a couple things that you can do to look out for as an individual. It's now you, putting the onus on you for dealing with the misinformation that comes in old technology, which are graphs and tables and statistics. And of course, in just arguments that are made, policy arguments that are made around big crisis events like the pandemic. So let's get started. All right, so here is a game that my colleague Karl Bergstrom and I developed last year. It's called whichfacesreal.com. You can go there and play the game if you want. It's a very simple game. We give you two images. One's a real image of a real human on this earth. The other one is a picture that was created using computers in a relatively short amount of time using this deepfake technology. These images can be created cheaply. You can make a lot of them, and it makes it even harder now to discern whether an image is real or not. That's another sort of depressing thing we have to deal with today. But we show you some of the things to look out for, at least, and just most importantly, to be aware of it. So you can go and play. By the way, the one on the right is real here. Don't feel bad if you get it wrong. I get it wrong all the time. But now let's move beyond photographs and instead look at a video that was created using this technology that you can, again, scale and do in many forms. It's from an individual that most of you might recognize. So let's go ahead and listen now and see what this individual says.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. Fate has ordained that the men who went to the moon to explore in peace will stay on the moon to rest in peace.
Just in case you missed it, let's just listen one more time. It's a very short video. Listen one more time what's being said and look closely at the video to see if there's anything you can see that looks of modification.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. Fate has ordained that the men who went to the moon to explore in peace will stay on the moon to rest in peace.
So it looks like some of you may not have seen the thing. So for those that didn't see the video, what you were seeing was Nixon saying something he never said. He essentially said, we didn't land on the moon and there was a disaster. Now, he didn't say that, but that was created, that technology, or that video was created with technology that can basically put whatever words you want in a person's mouth. You can see how that would be could be quite damaging, especially during major elections. And it's already reared its ugly head in elections around the world. And here's what's even more concerning about it, not even just the technology, but just the fact that it exists creates what's called the liar's dividend. And that is, even legitimate videos can be protected defended, I guess, by saying, it must have been a deepfake. I never said those awful things. And so this is the world in which we are now contending. Now, I don't have time. I have two more I wanted to show you, one that was real and one that was not. But because a few of you couldn't see it, I think I'm going to move on instead and just jump to the slide that explains where you can go learn more about these deep fakes. In collaboration with Microsoft, USA Today, and one of our other organizations, used to be Deep Trace and now Sensitivity, and our Center for an Informed Public, we created some resources and a quiz, a fun quiz to play, that helps you better understand these deep fakes and what to look out for. So if you see a deep fake, or if you are suspicious of one, at least you'll have a little bit more in your tool of discernment. So go ahead and you can visit there. But again, the idea here, there is new technology that's making the discernment of truth harder and harder, but it doesn't mean we have to give up. We still can use old-fashioned, who's telling me this, how do they know it, and what do they have to sell? Does it sound too good or too bad to be true? And then to triangulate, to look at other sources, to do the kinds of things that we've been doing for centuries and for a long, long time. But now I want to turn the onus onto you. In these smoky times, I'm reminded of Smokey the Bear, and as a kid was influential to me. I grew up near outdoor and forest area, and I remember the messages that I heard as a kid, and I think it's a good message now, not just because of the smoke we're hearing now, but because of a different kind of smoke that we're seeing nowadays. Smoke, pollution of information in our social media environments. And these social media environments and these platforms, we do depend nowadays because the news environment, the media environment has changed in a way that we're not necessarily, I don't see us going back to pre-Web 2.0 anymore. I think it's here to stay, and now it's dependent on us to be better information consumers. So if I had one slide to say, that's all I got, I get 4 words, what can I do better in today's world as an individual citizen? How can I help contribute to the solution rather than problem? It would simply be this, that we need to think more and share less. We need to pause before we're sharing, because the sharing, if we're not digging past the headline, if we're not doing a little bit of work before sharing things that do attract our attention or give us an emotional reaction, they then get pushed to the next one. The algorithms see that, they sort of amplify those things, and your friends then share it. They then amplify these kinds of things, and it's us who share them. There are bad actors out there, bad foreign actors that are injecting disinformation into our information environments. There are propagandists and opportunists making money from conspiracy theories. Certainly they are, but we, the citizens, the sort of responsible citizens, are the ones sharing it. So if we can think more, share less, that would be a big, big step. But now, if you were to think more, share less, and pause for a moment, what do? Well, my colleague and I, as Doug mentioned, we have a new book that just came out in August, devoted to teaching people how to identify misinformation, specifically the kind that comes wrapped in data, graphics, and other forms of quantitative information, which usually gets a free ride most of the time. When people see quantitative information or a number or a percentage, it seems precise and objective and scientific. And we want to help you question those numbers in the same way that we question language and rhetoric and clickbait online. These are the kinds of things that we're doing with the book. And it's based on a course that we developed, as Doug said, with my colleague Karl Bergstrom. And it's being taught at dozens of universities around the country and around the world. In fact, we've been approached by over 100 universities about the context. So there is a kind of BS movement going on in education, and I'm excited about that because it's something we should be focusing on when thinking about the skills to give to students. Because honestly, as someone who works at a university and spent his career working at a university, I don't think we're teaching our students to question numbers in the same way. And again, numbers have a lot of influence on policy decisions, and they're a kind of misinformation that get ignored. Of course, deepfakes get a lot of attention right now, and they should. They can be quite damaging and have impact. We do need to look at all the different ways that platforms are spreading this, and we talk a lot about that both in the book and also in our center. But really, we think there needs to be even more attention on teaching people, in addition to things about misinformation, disinformation, but about concepts like selection bias and data visualization and the ways that technology can make it more and more difficult to discern what's true or not, and to talk about the nature of science, partly because it's a system that's built for self-correction and for getting at a type of truth, at least about nature. And so we spend a lot of time talking about this. So what I want to do now is talk about two of those topics. One of my favorite of all of them is selection bias, and use a couple examples to talk about what you can look for, because this concept props up all the time. And you don't need a PhD in statistics or machine learning to be able to apply this particular topic of selection bias to many, many things that we're seeing in the news. And I'll show you some examples. But before I start, I have to give you an example of what I mean by selection bias. So selection bias, by definition, the way Karl and I define this, it occurs when you sample, or not just people, but things you sample in a population, when that sample differs systematically from the population at large with respect to the question you're asking. And ignoring selection bias can produce really misleading estimates about the population. So let's look at a couple current examples, at least when it comes to the current pandemic we're in. So this was a particular article that went viral. It was based on a report and a public report of two dentists that claimed that they were seeing an increase in the number of cavities that they weren't seeing before mask wearing began. And so they made a jump in causality, thinking that masks may be causing these cavities. But there is a selection bias problem here, and I'll pause for a second to see if anyone has an answer to that. Feel free to drop it in the chat. And it's hard for me to be quiet, but I'm going to be quiet for just 5 seconds. What? Oh, it's going to be quiet. What could possibly explain this increase in frequency that these dentists might be seeing in cavity compared to before the pandemic? Now, there's lots of explanations to these things, but most likely the best explanation, fewer people going to dentists due to the pandemic. Very good. We've got everyone spot on. Well done. I'm already seeing other good, great answers. I could sit on this answer for a long time, and we do this with students and really pick apart the claim. And many times it's many answers. I love the answers coming in. So many of you are noting that during a pandemic, less people are likely going in, especially for routine exams, and those that are going in likely have serious problems like cavities. So that's why they might see a higher frequency. That's one example. Let's look at another example of a serious selection bias problem. And this particular one went even more viral. The video that these doctors posted was on YouTube, and I think it had over 5 million views before it was taken down. And we can debate whether it should have been taken down. I tend to agree or tend to think that maybe that should have been kept up, and for others to sort of look at that. And I don't think these doctors had nefarious intent. I think they just fell prey to a pretty serious selection bias issue. What they claimed is that based on testing patients that came into their urgent care facility in March, they claimed that by extrapolating the data they had, and in this case, they had 340 out of 52 13 tests that were positive, and it gave them about a 6.6% rate, and they concluded that the incident rate in California was 12%, implying a very low infection fatality rate, 0.03%. But the problem here is there was another selection bias problem. You don't even need to go into the calculations, and you really don't even need to have any fancy statistical training to know what the problem was here. So I'll pause for a second. What was the problem with this one? What was the selection bias problem that these Bakersfield doctors fell prey to? And this one, by the way, was retweeted by large influencers around the country, which allowed it to go viral. But there was a big problem. It was a selection bias problem here too. Yes, Very good. I'm seeing this chat is working great. And the answers, again, lots of good answers on things. The one that at least certainly the one that I've latched onto mostly because it's a selection bias issue, is that people coming into a clinic because they're sick are not a random sample of the population. That would be a little bit like going onto an NBA basketball court as a way of, and measuring their height as a way of figuring out what the average height of Americans is. So estimating the average height of Americans from the players on an NBA court, it's a very similar thing. So you see these selection biases all the time. Now I have another example here, but I think I'm gonna skip it because I wanna make sure there's plenty of time for questions. It's a really fun example about sufficiency, and it's something that I call, that Karl and I talk about, it's something that logicians talk about all the time, people that work in logic, that are necessary versus sufficient. And it was a very serious one that came out of the CDC and that the media misinterpreted. Again, I'll leave that for another training that we're gonna have with AARP, and we can talk about those examples. We have infinite examples, as you can imagine. But let me just mention something about the interface with science, especially during the pandemic, where science has been forced into the fast lane, a lane that science is not comfortable with. Science moves along systematically and slowly, and it takes time to sort out challenging questions and challenging problems. But what we're seeing during the pandemic is this acceleration of these research projects. And in this case, this was a story about droplets of runners landing on other runners and that we should be careful. The problem with this research study is it didn't even exist. This was only a simulation. There was no paper to critique. There was no peer review of this paper, of course. And this was written all across the world. It was in radio stations, including our local ones, and in newspapers and on national TV, but there was no study available. And just doing some digging and sourcing, something we really try to train our students to do and that we can all do better, would have identified that there was no study. And so these are the kinds of things we want to look out for. Also, when looking at science papers, look about if they're on a preprint server or whether they're in a peer-reviewed journal. If they're on a preprint server, it doesn't mean it's wrong. But certainly if there's a big red box like this one has, this was a paper that claimed there was similarities between the HIV genome and the COVID genome, sort of indicating possibly an engineered viral particle. The thing with this article is it was one of the most virally spread articles in science of all time based on these altmetric scores. That's a big score on the right. You don't need to know what it means other than this paper spread wildly, yet it had been retracted and identified. And yet all of us, including scientists, a lot of us could have been looking and seeing that it had been retracted. So again, digging to the source a little bit can help us before we share. So think more, share less. So what I want to do in the last section here is talk about the ways in which we talk about data and communicate in data most often, and that is through graphs and information visualizations. And they're everywhere. We see them, we've seen a rise, of course, just in our data revolution over the last 10 to 15 years. We see them in newspapers, on TV. We see them in boardrooms, in business meetings. We see them on social media. We see them everywhere. And the problem is we're not doing a good enough job in education training the public and students how to discern when there's misinformation and a lot of times honest mistakes in graphs. And so that is something I want you to be looking out for as well when talking about the election, the pandemic, and other kinds of major events like that. So first, it turns out that most people still, about 50% of Americans still get the majority of their news from TV. And that there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's good. But what we see on TV are a lot of times graphics, well, not a lot of times, almost every day, we see data graphics terribly put together. And they're not always this bad. So here's something that CBS put up, Americans who have tried marijuana. And Karl and I have our issues with pie graphs altogether. But this particular one, there's so many problems wrong with it. I don't even sometimes know where to start with this particular one, but it's just sort of to make a strong point that first of all, the total is greater than 100%. The relevant categories are today, last year, and the year 1997. Seems what arbitrary. And the margin of error, MOE, is listed as the source. I mean, there's just so many problems, but this just kind of gives you a sample of the problems that we're seeing, of course, on national broadcast TV, where still the majority of people get their news. And of course, it doesn't, we see it on the left media and the right media. Here's a graph I can't even interpret at all about the Spanish flu, and Philadelphia is on the x-axis for whatever reason, and St. Louis is on the y-axis. We could talk about it, but I'll just move on. It happens, not just on Fox, but it happens on MSNBC. This was on the Rachel Maddow show, showing a large difference in COVID cases in different counties in Kansas based on different policies. But if you look very carefully, you'll notice that the y-axes are are treated differently, which can create all sorts of illusionary differences between graphs. The correct way, of course, to have drawn this is to have had the same y-axis scales and then told your story, which would have been much different and was different than the one that was told. And again, we see this on the left and right. We try to give examples on the left. And by the way, a lot of these are still honest mistakes. What's wrong with this particular one? This was on national TV. I believe this was on a national Latin American TV station. What's wrong with this one? Anyone see the problem here? Well, because I'm short for time, I'm going to move on, but I know that someone's going to find this one. If you look at the actual numbers, they don't track the graph itself. So if you look at the end, you'll see 218 is under 165. This happens all the time. And again, we just need to be more aware of what we're seeing. And there's all sorts of ways to take the same data and tell whatever story you want, really, if you change the bins and you change histograms, etc. But even just simple ways of telling and maybe hyping certain stories can be done with different kinds of graphs. So here's a graph that Tim Cook put up shortly after he took the helm at Apple TV, looking at the massive increase in the cumulative iPhone sales. And you'll see here that it absolutely is going up. The problem is this was a cumulative graph. And as far as I know, all cumulative graphs go up. And if you looked at quarterly sales of iPhones, there was a much different story. Again, but this occurs in our governments all the time. It certainly happened recently in the White House using a cumulative graph to look at COVID testing in the US. Again, these may be honest mistakes that were made, but it happens all the time. The things that we can look out for. Here was a particular graph that got a lot of attention, for better and for worse, that came out of the Georgia Department State of Health. What they showed here are the counts by county and at these different time periods. But you'll notice something very strange about this one as well. Because of shortness of time, I'm going to move quickly. The time on the x-axis is absolutely arbitrary. A little bit of April, then back to May, and you can then show your decreasing trend. And they were called for this, and to their credit, they did update it, and they admitted their mistake, which we do appreciate. But then shortly thereafter, the same department created a heat map of the different cases across different counties and showed that, at least if you just look visually, there wasn't much change. But again, if you change the bins and you change the boxes by which you throw data in, you can tell any story you want, and they did change those significantly. Again, they admitted their mistake on this and changed. But then again, the same department, and maybe they just need a little bit more training in data science and data reasoning, which is one thing we want to push more broadly. They showed here a really huge downward trend. This was when there were major discussions about whether they should open up as a state. The problem here is they were using a 14-day window where they hadn't collected all the data, and there are all sorts of problems in sort of using that as a way of extrapolating. And if you just look at the data after it's been updated, it doesn't have these kinds of trends. So again, just to emphasize, there's Occam's razor and then there's Hansel's razor, which I like. Never ascribe to malice what can be adequately explained by incompetence, and never ascribe to incompetence what could be understandable mistakes. So when going into these things, be empathetic and understand that we all make mistakes, but we need to be on the lookout. So I'll end with this message: that technology and social media, which are things that I spend my time studying, the rise of these technologies and the internet and the social web have profoundly changed how individuals, groups, and organizations produce and consume information, how they participate in public discourse, and organize and induce political action. Lots of good have come from this. And this way of human interaction and information sharing has amplified diverse voices and enhanced collective action in many ways. But these information environments have opened the door to misinformation and disinformation and other forms of network manipulation, which function not only to mislead and create divisions, but they also diminish trust in democratic institutions such as science and journalism. I think it's one of the most pressing problems of our time, and we can't solve all these other big problems unless we solve them first. So I will say that we certainly, so sorry, I forgot to switch it. I was talking about social media's negative effects, but 2020 has been a difficult year, especially in the misinformation, disinformation space. But I really do think if we all get involved like we did during the environmental movements and the cleanup of our environments in the 70s, the 60s, 70s, and 80s, I think we can do the same thing for information pollution online. So it's up to you, as Smokey the Bear says. And with that, I'll end and we can turn to questions. If you want to follow me either on Twitter or reach out to our center, feel free to email us, follow us, contact us of any form. We can't wait to interact with AARP and for other organizations around the community. Thanks so much.
Well, great. Well, thank you, Jevin. This is Doug Shadell. That was really informative, and I knew we were going to have this problem, which is there's about 10 times more information than we could possibly put into this short of a period. But we have a whole huge group of questions from the audience, and I think we should just get into it. So I'm going to pose these questions that I picked out, trying to pick ones that there's so many we can't answer them all, but try and pick ones where there are multiple people asking the same thing, if that's okay. So one of them is just sort of a cluster of questions is, how do you talk to someone who's convinced that the conspiracy theory that they've heard or the misinformation they've heard is absolutely accurate? How do you talk to someone like that? And I think you were alluding to that just at the end there about sympathy and empathy, but if you want to take a shot at that one, a lot of people are asking that.
It's a really important question, and it's something I struggle with myself. I have friends and family and neighbors that I talk to about these issues, and it's something we talk about in the center all the time. And there are researchers doing this work full time, thinking about the strategies by which you do address individuals that really believe wholeheartedly in these conspiracy theories. I think the first thing to do is treat the person on the other side as a human with empathy. They believe what they're seeing for various reasons. And it's not going to help to shame them or to, call them stupid. Of course, I mean, I think that's obvious, but I mean, there's research obviously to support this as well. I think as humans and our years of interaction, we know that, but sometimes we forget that. We don't want to vilify them. And then start with asking them questions about where they got their information and to go on that path with them and to talk about the issues that might have come up that, that they found, let's say, for an example, a source from a new website that never existed up till yesterday and claims something, or it's a website that has been refuted many times by fact checkers that doesn't have a good reputation, that it's by an individual who has known to sell conspiracy theories, that there is a difference in experts, let's say in science versus your people, that you talk to on social media, to talk to them about the ways that bad actors are there to manipulate us. And these platforms themselves are there to do one thing, and that's to attract our eyeballs. And so by knowing that, we can be a little bit more vigilant. So I think, there's all sorts of things you can do, but engaging them with an honest conversation with empathy and really asking them questions, kind of like you would if you were an encyclopedian or just a curious individual. So where did you find that? Let me show you some of the things that I found or some of the issues with that particular source of information. And also, we have a project that we're just releasing in collaboration with several of my colleagues. It's a public service announcement project that gives you the tools for looking at whether the site, the journalism media site that you're reviewing, follows a set of basic guidelines of journalism. And there's many that do, and then there are some that don't. That, for example, don't admit mistakes, that don't mention retractions and things like that. So there's all sorts of things to do, but it's hard. And I don't have a perfect answer, and I'm still figuring it out myself.
Well, that leads me to the next question, which there's a lot of questions about, one is from Carlos. Many distrust all information, news media, government agencies, and social media. How can we have a rational discussion when there doesn't seem to be a benchmark or a standard of truth? And that sort of gets to what sources are credible and how do you, where do you start on this? Do you have any comment about that?
Yeah, so it really gets at the heart of trust and the role that trust plays in all of this. And over the last decade or so, there has been a decrease of trust in major institutions, including the government, including journalism. And people don't just take away trust. Trust doesn't just disappear. It's kind of like the conservation of mass. This is an idea that a postdoc in our center just started thinking about, Rachel Moran, and she thinks about this as a conservation of trust. And when you take away the trust in one venue or one institution, it just shifts somewhere else. And so that shifting goes to places that don't have the vetting, that are maybe possibly darker places of the internet, that are people that don't have the expertise or the reputations at stake. Now, it doesn't mean that national media always gets it right. They don't. They absolutely don't. And we need to hold them accountable, because the current hyper-partisan media environment that we live in is a reflection of ourselves. And we need to address that, absolutely. But when people don't trust anything, that to me is almost, if not more damaging than even the misinformation itself. In fact, it's the goal of disinformation campaigns, many of them, is simply to erode trust in institutions. And that's happening. I mean, if you look at a lot of these research studies on trust and these trust indicators that are done across the different disciplines in research and those that track this closely, those are going down, including in areas like science and even universities, depending on various demographics and geographic locations. But the point is, those things are going down. And if everyone doesn't trust anything, then we're really in a world of hurt if we want this democracy to work. So what we need to do is we need to engage people, and we need to stop really attacking all these institutions. I'm
having trouble hearing you, Jevin. I'm having trouble hearing you. I don't know if anybody else is, but oh, there he goes.
Can you hear me now? Sorry. Okay, just to summarize, yes, to me, it's probably the thing I'm concerned about the most, which is that people, or younger generation, or all people in general, just start distrusting everything. And we can't have a working democracy. We have to trust in institutions and in experts.
Another question that came up was, what is it about human nature? Take a shot at this one, because I want to know the answer to this. What is it about human nature that causes us to want to forward these things that are so controversial? Is it the novelty of it, or what? Or is it to get attention? I know there's been a lot of studies about this, but I remember in one of your classes that I was looking at online, you were saying this great quotation from someone I forget who, Mark Twain or somebody, that a lie can get halfway around the world before the truth has a chance to put its boots on, or something like that.
It's britches and boots and everything, yeah.
Britches, right. And it's so true. Why is it true, and what can we do about it? You talked at the beginning about, if I could only leave you with one thing, it is go slower and share less, or something, But what is it about human nature, and how can we monitor ourselves better to avoid that kind of sharing of this misinformation?
Well, I think the way these platforms are set up, they have been optimized for user engagement. And these platforms have figured out, in addition to the gazillions of A/B experiments that they're running, testing our psychology, and know more about human psychology than any psychologist out there. They know what words and phrases and colors and designs are going to get us to click. And one thing that we do like to do as humans is to be in the know, to be the first one to share something, so then we get more likes and more follows. And we're incentivized to do that because of the social capital it gives us. And so that design, of course, was brilliant for getting us engaged, but it's terrible for spreading information that hasn't been vetted. And we also tend to spread things, of course, that confirm our bias, or that sort of confirm our narrative, something that psychologists talk about called confirmation bias. So we all have these biases, all of us, no one's immune to it. And when we see something that confirms what we think is the right, sort of the way the world works, we share it, we're likely to share. We also share things as humans just to get people's attention, and some things that are crazy. The man bites dog is what gets shared, and not the other way around. And that's a problem of humans. So it's a technology challenge we're dealing with, but even more so likely a human challenge we need to deal with as well.
Yeah, you had a quotation from a scholar, I forget who it was now, who said that people share because that's their identity. That is to say, you share things that reflect the way you want to be known. Do you call this?
Absolutely. This is something that scholars have been talking about, which is tribal epistemology, this idea that what I share doesn't even have to be true sometimes. It just has to be a signal that I'm a part of your tribe. So I might say send something I even know that's not true or just kind of preposterous, but it's even a stronger signal that I am on your team. And by doing that, it sends that signal, but it also then amplifies a lot of this misinformation. And one thing that you had mentioned in the previous question that I forgot to address was this Brandolini's asymmetry principle too, which is that it's orders of magnitude easier to create BS than it is to clean it up. So once that goes out, it's easy to create that kind of stuff now too, but very, very difficult to clean up for some of these things, and especially when it comes to health misinformation. And so, yeah, we're dealing, again, another human side of this problem, that we don't even need sophisticated conversations about new algorithms and new interfaces in our technology. We really just need to address this as humans that we are.
Well, we're getting close to the end here, Jevin, and I just want to give us time to talk about this training that's going to come up and sort of the collaboration AARP is doing. We have for many years tried to train people to be fraud fighters and watch for scams that are out there. And this is not the same thing exactly, but it's very close. And already, just since knowing you and since being much more aware of these misinformation, how to spot it, I find myself changing the way I interpret information. And I think part of the vision of this is to try and engage our membership and the general public in becoming, well, maybe you want to just talk about the fact check ambassador idea and what's behind that, why we're trying to engage people in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something I'm really excited about. And really, I want to make sure everyone knows that this was Doug's idea. And Doug came to me, and I think it's this great work that AARP has been doing around fraud detection, which has a lot of overlaps with detecting misinformation. I mean, there's areas where there's absolute perfect overlap in what we're doing. But misinformation detection and fact checking is even broader. It deals with things that might not affect us directly, but might have large scale effects on our communities. And what we want to do is we want to engage all of you, and everyone can be a fact checker, everyone. And so what we want to do is engage those that want to become better at it, just individually, and those that want to even help us as a center identify things that you see in your Facebook feeds or in news that you read or things that you see on the internet or things you see in your email, where you can forward those things to us and we'll tell you the kinds of things that we're looking for, and we'll help you become better at that, and you can help us become better at it. And then we're going to feed those into a vetting, basically a big fact-checking kind of a system that helps us clean up this stuff in the digital space. And this is a nonpartisan effort. We want people from both sides of the political aisle. We want to identify things that we, again, wouldn't see. So it's a chance to do education and get us all better at becoming BS detectors, and also a way of engaging and connecting as a community on this big problem, because the work that AARP members could do in digital volunteerism will feed into the work that's collaborative among governments and journalism and nonprofits and industry leaders and local communities, and how we all need to come together and get connected on this. And this is a way of going about doing that. So I'm super excited. If you can come to the training, feel free to come. If you can't, that's totally okay. We'll do some others. But this is what that Doug and I have been talking about, and I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, I really am too. And I think that it's just an opportunity. I had asked Jevin at one point, well, why do you need us? I mean, you're already evaluating 2 billion tweets a day, and they have all these sort of machine learning ways to get at it. And he's like, that isn't true. We're missing a lot of things. We're not in your space. Your space, your unique information space, is something that we don't necessarily have access to. So this idea that you would have a network of people, a crowdsourcing tool that could feed into this, just helps us detect more of it. And I think it also, as individuals, makes us better digital citizens. Well, I want to just thank Dr. West. Jevin, you have just been a great partner so far. This has been a fascinating hour. We could go for 2 more hours. And if we didn't get to your question, I apologize. We will try and address them. I tried to take, the big chunk areas that were there. And if you're interested in the follow-up, there's information in the resource section on the September 28th training. We will probably record that and let people, if they can't make it, and let people know how they can access that information. So for now, thank you so much for your time. Thank you again to Dr. West and the Center for an Informed Public. Thank you to Boeing Employee Credit Union, BECU, for all of their support. Have a great afternoon.